when people get their first job out of school, or they get a big raise, or they have a windfall, like an inheritance or something like that, they tend to just blow it, right? They just find ways of spending it on themselves rather than putting it to work for them in a way that's going to help them build wealth long term. And we get that. Deni, you were making the comment a minute ago that they don't teach personal finance in school, right?
Yeah, they don't. They
know.
teach algebra and calculus that we don't even use, but nothing about how to handle your money.
Right. So people don't know, what is the best way to use this money that I've just received or just started receiving. So, they find ways to blow it on new cars or more meals out or whatever. And there's a statistic that I was trying to find right before we hit the record button, a statistic I read years ago that was that when people receive a significant inheritance, the average heir buys a new car within 19 days, right? Which just sort of illustrates this point. And you had pulled up this great quote from Warren Buffett. If you buy things you don't need, soon you will have to sell things you do need, which illustrates that point as well. So guys, welcome to the Bucks Outside the Box show, where we challenge conventional money advice. We get a little contrarian and we try to get outside the box. So Dave Ramsey, he has a baby steps program. It's 7 steps, which is, his order of operations for what you should do with your money, with your savings. And there's nothing wrong with it. It is designed for the average, working class person, doesn't know anything about money.
Or beginners, somebody.
And he keeps it super simple. And I get that. I respect that. That is what the average person needs. Deni, you and I are not speaking to the average person on this show. We are speaking to someone who is a little bit more sophisticated about money.
Or at least wants to be more
sophisticated about money. Exactly. So today we wanted to get a little bit more nuanced with that financial order of operations. So instead of the whole 7 baby steps things that's really oversimplified, we're going to get a little bit more sophisticated with this, a little bit more nuanced, to speak to someone who probably earns a little bit more money, someone who is a little bit more ambitious in building wealth, and wants to know what is the best thing to do with my money right now, depending on where I am on this journey. So without further ado, let's jump into this order of operations. So the first thing that you want to do with your savings is, if your employer offers you a matching contribution to a 401k or other workplace retirement account, max that out. Take full advantage of their matching contribution, because that is free money, basically. That's part of your compensation. And if you are leaving it on the table, then you're basically saying, no, I don't want that free money you're offering me. That's part of my salary, part of my compensation. That's an 100% return on your investment if you're getting an 100% match from your employer, right? If you invest $1,000 in your 401k and you get a full match, then you get an instant 100% return on that $1,000, right?
Now, is there any negatives to that? I mean, it's probably not accessible, so you have to understand that.
Right. I mean, so 401k and other retirement accounts, you can't access them until age 59 and a half, unless you have, there are a couple of exceptions to the rule. But in general, it's there. It's locked up until you reach 59 and a half, at which time you can start pulling it out penalty free. And you can pull it out early. You just have to pay a tax penalty to the IRS. You pay taxes on it and you pay a penalty to the IRS. So that's the first thing. Max out your employer matching contributions to your retirement account, because that's free money. And it's not just free money. It's something that's part of your compensation package. So if you're ignoring it, then you're turning away free money. All right. That's step 1. Step 2. Get to at least $500 in your emergency fund. Everybody needs an emergency fund. Not everyone needs the exact same amount in their emergency fund. And this is going to be a recurring theme. We're going to keep coming back to this emergency fund throughout this process, because you're going to want to keep building this up over time. But getting to $500 in your emergency fund, that is crucial, just to have something there, in case your car breaks down and you have to have it repaired, or you have a roof repair that needs to happen in your house, or you have a health issue. You need an emergency fund. Get to $500 as an urgent thing, right? This is a very urgent thing. You got to get there very quickly. All right. 3, pay off your credit card balances.
Because a lot of times, if you don't save your emergency fund, you go to your credit card.
Well, right. And credit card companies charge, I don't know what the average rate is right this second. I probably should have looked that up before the show, but it's normally hovers in the low 20% range. So like
Which is
21%.
ridiculous.
Yeah, it's outrageously high interest, right? No one wants to pay 21% interest on debt, especially consumer debt that you don't actually need, to buy a sofa or a new pair of jeans or something. You don't need it to live. So knock that out. Pay off your credit card balances. And then moving forward, pay them off in full every single month so that credit cards are all upside for you and no downside. So you're
And
getting
find ones with rewards.
well, right, exactly. So you can take advantage of those rewards and not have to actually pay anything for them. Problem with those rewards is there's a reason why credit card companies offer them, right? Because people overspend on their credit card balances, in some cases because of those rewards. But those people who are not paying off their credit card balances in full every month, they are subsidizing people like me who I do pay off my credit card balance every month. So I'm not paying anything to the credit card companies, but I still get those wonderful rewards, right? So people out there who are listening to this, who are carrying a balance, you're subsidizing me and my free travel. So you don't want to do that, right? Like that. So you want to cut that out. You want to knock out those credit card balances as soon as possible. All right. The next priority to get to is getting to a $1,500 emergency balance. A balance in your emergency savings account. We already spent some time talking about that, but so we're going to keep returning to this.
And can I mention something little?
Please.
I'm older, and I think when you are younger, you don't think, oh, nothing's going to happen. I don't have to worry about that. But it does. Things
Always
happen.
happen. Yeah, so last year maybe it was that your AC condenser went out and needed to be repaired. This year maybe it's that your car needs a $1,500 repair or $3,000 repair or whatever. Next year it's a health emergency that hits you, right? Like it's always something. Like there's always going to be something. Now what that something is changes, but you need to be prepared for curveballs because life is always going to throw you curveballs. They're just going to look a little different. So anyway. So this is number 4, and I didn't actually number these on my notes here. Maybe I should do that now. But yeah, so that's number 4 here is get to $1,500 in your emergency fund. This is after you've paid off your credit card balances. Okay. Number 5, the next priority here is pay off any other unsecured debts that you have. For example, personal loans, right? Or maybe student loans, depending on your interest rate. Now, some people have student loans that are like subsidized interest rates that are very cheap. If the interest rate is below 5%, maybe keep it in place for now. But if it's above 5%, pay it off, knock it out.
Yes.
So thereabouts. Next item, number 6 here on the priority list. Get to 1 month's living expenses in your emergency fund, right? One month's worth of living expenses in your emergency. All right. Number 7 here. Max out your Roth IRA contributions. Now, yes, there's some nuance here, depending on how old you are, depending on your financial priorities and your tax brackets and so forth. Maybe you should be contributing to a traditional IRA instead of a Roth IRA. For most people, a Roth IRA is the better value. Now, if you're a couple years away from retirement but you're still in your peak earning years, then a traditional IRA probably does make more sense. It's probably better for you to take the tax break now, while you're in your peak earning years. And since there isn't a lot of time for that money to compound tax-free as it does in a Roth account.
What is the major difference, would you say, between Roth and traditional?
Yeah, well, so that's something that you should understand, that everybody should understand. So traditional IRA or traditional 401k or other workplace retirement account for that matter, same rules. So you get to deduct whatever you contribute to it. You can deduct that from this year's taxes. So that, if you earn $100,000 and you put $7,000 of that in your traditional IRA, then that $7,000 comes off your taxable income of $100,000. So now you're paying taxes on $93,000 instead of $100,000, right? So you get the immediate deduction for that contribution. However, when you pull that money out of your IRA in retirement, you pay full taxes on it.
So they're going to get you one way or another.
Well, they're going to get you, but here's the thing: is that your money, if you're 25 and you're contributing money to your traditional IRA, then that money is compounding over the course of 40 years, right? Before you actually retire and start pulling it out. Now you're talking about a much larger amount of money, and you're going to be paying taxes on that much larger amount of money, right? And this is something you and I talk about all the time. Every tax expert in the country agrees that tax rates will go up in the coming years. They have to. It's just math. The government is spending more money than they're bringing in, and they've been doing so for a long time, and that's accelerating. And you now have two parties who both just want to spend money without actually bringing in the revenue. So there is no voice of fiscal conservatism anymore in DC. There's no one making that case. Everyone's just like, let's spend. So we're gonna have to pay the piper for that at some point. So how are we gonna do that? Well, we're probably gonna have to cut back spending to an uncomfortable degree, and while simultaneously raising taxes. So in the future, you will owe more in taxes. Tax rates will go up. So Roth IRA, you take the tax hit now, but the money compounds tax-free in your Roth IRA, and you pay no taxes in retirement when you withdraw it. So for younger people, in their 20s and 30s and even 40s, that is definitely the way to go, because that money's it has decades to compound and grow. So, you pay tax on it now, but, that's going to be much, much larger, many times larger in retirement when you're actually pulling it out. And if you have a traditional IRA, paying taxes on it, but Roth IRA, you've already paid the taxes. It's done. So it's all tax-free in retirement, which means you need less money in your retirement accounts when you retire, because all of it's coming to you. You're not having to shave off a quarter of it or 40% of it for taxes, right? So you don't need as much money in your Roth retirement accounts. So we went a little deeper on that dive, but so for most people, for most Americans, Roth IRA makes more sense. So contribute to your Roth IRA as the next priority. Okay, next priority, get to 2 months living expenses in your emergency fund. So you can see, like, over
seeing
time,
a pattern here.
Yeah, we're gradually building it up, but you don't have to get to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months of emergency fund on day one, right? That doesn't have to be your first priority, but you do need an emergency fund. So, we're just starting to gradually build that up over time, while also hitting these other notes, right? Hitting these other priorities in your personal finances. All right. So next, start dollar cost averaging both your stock investments and your passive real estate investments. Now, Deni and I, obviously, this is what we do is passive real estate investing. So of course we're biased a little bit here. But I mean, this is what I do with my personal money, right? This is how I invest my own money. So this is what I'm recommending to you. So I put about half of my money into stock investments and the other half into passive real estate investments, which are a mix of debt investments and equity investments like syndications or equity funds. We issue private notes as fixed interest debt investments as well. We do private partnerships. I mean, we do all that stuff. And we're not trying to pitch any one of those things on you. We do all of it. We encourage diversification with all that stuff.
And diversification is really important, because if something happens over here, you're still golden.
Yeah. So, and same thing with stocks, right? You want to diversify your stocks, US stocks, international stocks, emerging markets stocks, large cap stocks, mid cap stocks, small cap stocks. I mean, all of the above.
You do not want to have a gambling mindset like when crypto came out and everybody was like, woo.
Right. Crypto is pure speculation, right? And the difference for anyone who is wondering the difference between, a speculative asset versus an investment asset. Investment assets, you can measure their actual value based on the revenue that they produce. It's true for stocks. It's true for bonds. It's true for real estate. So you can look at a company, a stock, for example, and say, how much money did this company earn last quarter, right? And the stock is going to be valued as some kind of multiple of that, right? Same thing for real estate. If you're looking at an apartment building, how much revenue did it bring in last quarter, last year, et cetera? And some kind of multiple of that is the value of that investment. And you can measure it. And then you can talk about how cheap or expensive it is based on that multiple of the revenue. Cryptocurrency doesn't generate revenue. So you're just hoping that someone else in the future will pay more for it than what you paid.
Right.
But there's no underlying revenue, which means there's no underlying value there. And which is why some of these cryptocurrencies just drop to zero, right? Largely overnight. Or they can shoot to the moon because there becomes like a buying frenzy and everyone's willing to pay more. But it's just speculation, right? They're speculative assets. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't own any cryptocurrency. I own a little bit with play money, but it's play money, right? Because it is speculation. All right. Again, we kind of went down a rabbit hole there. But so start dollar cost averaging. And for anyone who doesn't know what that term means, dollar cost averaging, it just means on a regular basis, at least once a month, just be putting some small amount of money into it. Yeah, and small in quotation marks, there's small, it's all relative. But so every week, I have a robo advisor that just pulls money out of my checking account and it invests it in a stock portfolio for me. That's dollar cost averaging, right? Every week, it's just pulling a small amount of money out of my checking account and investing it. With real estate investments, every month, our co-investing club meets and we vet new passive real estate investments together as an investment club. What are the risks on this one? How do we feel about the returns? What does the timeline look like? How does everyone feel about this? What are your concerns about it? And then any of our members who want to invest in that can do so with $2,500 or more. And this is how we invest in passive real estate, but it's every month and sometimes twice a month. Sometimes
Right.
we do a second investment in a month. But it's the same thing, right? It's dollar cost average. Every month, I'm just putting a little bit of money into these investments. Not trying to time the market, not trying to get cute or clever about it. Just, day in, day out, or, month in, month out, just making these investments. So dollar cost averaging your stock investments and your real estate investments. Okay, next priority here is paying off your car loan. Now, this
I
is
want to add something to this too. My father was a very successful businessman and he also invested in everything. He would never, ever, ever buy a brand new car. Ever.
I don't
No
either.
matter. Oh, well, see, either do I.
I just bought a car
So,
last year, and yeah, no, it was a pretty recent car. It was a 2-year-old car when we bought it. So we bought it in 2025. It was a 2023.
right.
But yeah, because there's an exponential curve. If you look at the curve for car depreciation, it loses a huge chunk of value in year one, and then it loses less value in year two, and then less value in year three, and it forms a curve.
Well, he
So,
used to joke that as soon as your wheels leave the dealership, your car just went plump, plunk,
right,
in
yeah,
value.
you lose like 15% of the value of the car the second you drive off the lot.
Anyway,
Anyway,
I didn't mean to take you all over
yeah,
there.
but yeah. So next priority here is paying off your car loan, and again, you don't have to do that all at once. You can just start making little extra payments to it every month as you're also doing all these other things, right? Okay. From there, you do, for most people, you want to get to at least 3 months of living expenses in your emergency fund. And for some people, it's more like 6 months, a year, even 2 years, depending on a couple factors. And we don't want to, we've probably done entire episodes on emergency funds. Actually, I don't remember. If we haven't, we should. But the more irregular and unreliable your income is, the more you need in an emergency fund. So, Deni, you and I own a business, and that income is up and down, right? And that's just the nature of owning a business. So, you and I need a larger emergency fund than like a nurse who works for a hospital and gets just a regular paycheck every 2 weeks, and they have incredibly good job security, right? You and I don't have that amazing job security, right? Like, we own a business. So, our income is up and down, and that's just what it is. And that's a trade-off that we made in exchange for the freedom of having our own business. But if your income is irregular, or even if it's regular, but your job security is not great, you need a greater emergency fund.
Yeah.
And the same thing goes for your expenses. If your expenses are irregular, then you need a larger emergency fund. So, somewhere between 3 months and 2 years is what people typically need in an emergency fund, or not need per se, but should have ideally. So this is the last time we're going to talk about emergency funds in this episode. But so, after you pay off your car loan, it's a good point to get to 3 months living expenses. And then you can kind of keep adding a little bit from there as you need to or want to. But it does depend on how regular your income is, what your job security, your income security is, and how variable your expenses are. Some people do have more irregular expenses where, maybe they go a few months and they only spend $1,500 a month or something.
Right.
And then they get
Or
hit with a
if you're
$10,000 bill.
self-employed, like my husband has a seasonal business. So we know already that we have to provide for that. So
Yeah.
you have to.
So,
Yeah.
you guys know, how regular and predictable your income and expenses are. And the less predictable that is, the more you need in an emergency fund. All right, we'll leave it there. Okay. Next on the list here is, building out these streams of passive income. Now, we touched on this a little bit already when we talked about stocks and passive real estate investments.
Right.
But this is when you really want to be doubling down on this and building out all of these different streams of income. So in our co-investing club, for example, we've done, I think, 44 real estate deals at this point. And most of those pay income Yeah, so I've invested in all of those, and most of them pay income to me. So these are all streams of income. Now, it's not a lot of income for each one of these because I invested relatively small amounts in all of these. You know,
Which is
2,500,
one of the
5 grand,
nice
10 grand.
things about this, because usually this type of investing, you have to put 50 grand or more in each deal. But because we're a club, we do significantly lower, like, 5,000 or sometimes even 2,500, depending on.
Right. So yeah, but building out these streams of income, and each stream might be small, like we mentioned, but we're just building these many, many streams of income that all start flowing in, while you're sleeping. And then that brings up another Warren Buffett quote, to keep the theme going today. And the quote goes, if you don't find a way to earn money while you sleep, you will work until you die. Right. So building out these streams of passive income, and many stocks pay dividends as well. That those tend to be much lower yields. But some stocks do pay dividends, some of them higher yield. Bonds, as you get closer to retirement, bonds can make sense to start making your portfolio a little bit more conservative. But building out these streams of passive income, and then ultimately the goal here, I mean, the next priority is really reaching financial independence, where those streams of passive income can cover your living expenses. So, this is really what we're working toward over time in the big picture. Now, it doesn't happen overnight. For most people, it doesn't even happen in a decade, right? But this is the end goal, is reaching financial independence so that work becomes optional. You can retire when you feel like it, when you're ready, or you can quit your like high stress day job and go do something that you're more passionate about,
That
that
you
probably
want to
pays less
do.
money,
You don't
right?
have to be dependent.
Exactly. So, that's ultimately what we're working toward here, building out these streams of passive income to reach financial independence. And then lastly, the last priority on this list is paying off your home mortgage loan. Now, you can move that earlier, and some people do. And for a lot of people, that's really more of an emotional decision than a mathematical decision, because the debt that you have on your home mortgage is the cheapest debt that you'll ever have. I mean, there are people out there with 2% interest mortgages, right? Not today, of course, or they're not taking those mortgages out today. But 5 years ago, people were borrowing money at 2% for their home mortgages. I mean, that if you can borrow money at 2% and you can invest it at 15%, like you and I do, Deni, in the co-investing club, I'll take that arbitrage all day long, right? Like that's basically free 13% returns on someone else's money. So now, and I get that some people out there have mortgages that are 6%, 7%. So these are more expensive, and maybe they want to pay them off a little earlier on that priority list, right? And,
What are your
we get
thoughts
that.
on refinancing?
In general, I'm not a big fan of it unless there's a huge interest savings. So if you have a 7% mortgage and you have an opportunity to refinance at 3%, yeah, that probably makes sense, right? Like that you probably want to do that. But to refinance from 7% to 6% probably doesn't make sense, right? Because you're paying thousands and thousands of dollars in fees and closing costs to the lender and to the title company and to the attorney and the notary who signs all the documents with you. So you're going to blow thousands of dollars to what? Save $50 a month on interest? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. And you have to restart the amortization. So you're pushing back your debt horizon, and you're restarting from scratch on the amortization curve. And that's a whole conversation in itself as well. But the very first payment that you make for any kind of installment loan, like a mortgage or a car loan, the highest percentage of that payment is to interest, right? And then every month that goes by, that proportion of payment that goes to interest versus principal, switches until by the end of the loan, almost all of your monthly payment is going towards principal paid on. But this is how banks win, right? This is how lenders win. Is for the first half of the loan, most of that payment is going to interest. So they're just laughing all the way to the bank. They are the bank, right? Like I mean, they're coming out ahead with that. So they want you to refinance for many reasons. That those upfront fees that they get to charge you in closing costs, and because they restart the amortization schedule. So
and they will bug you.
oh yeah, they're going to try to tell you to refinance. They're going to pitch you on that
Yes.
once you get to 7 years or so in your mortgage. So let's recap these really quickly. So max out your matching contributions from your employer if you have them as your first priority financially. Then get to $500 in an emergency fund. Next, pay off your credit card balance. Next, get to $1,500 in your emergency fund. Then pay off any other unsecured debts that you have, like personal loans. Get to 1 month's living expenses in your emergency fund. Then max out your Roth IRA. Get to 2 months living expenses in your emergency fund. Start dollar cost averaging, every paycheck, your stocks and your passive real estate investments. Pay off your car loan if you have one. Get to 3 months living expenses in your emergency fund. And then really just start doubling down on those stocks and passive real estate investments to build out these many streams of passive income in order to ultimately replace your paycheck, right? To have enough money coming in passive income that working becomes optional and you've reached financial independence. And then somewhere in that mix is paying off your home mortgage. You can do that earlier in the priority list if you want, if that helps you sleep at night. I get it. That's fine, especially if you're paying more in interest. If you have a really, really cheap mortgage, low interest, then keep it in place and make that the last thing you do, right? And that's it. So, those are more steps than Dave Ramsey's 7 baby steps, right? What is that? I don't know, 13 or 14 steps that we just ran through. But, again, this is just having a more nuanced conversation about this for people who are a little bit more sophisticated about their personal finances and who maybe have a little bit more ambition when it comes to their finances, right? People who want to build some wealth.
Right.
All right. On that note, we hope you got something out of this episode. This was a little bit of a longer one. Hope you stayed with us. But if you enjoyed this episode and the others, subscribe to the show and then pass it on to your friends and family members who also could get something out of this, right? Take something away from this. And if you are interested in passive real estate investing, take our free course on how that works because most people are not that familiar with how these work. So we have a free course on it, sparkrenall.com/free. And we hope to see you in the co-investing club as one more member. Deni and I invest in these ourselves every month. So on that note, stay weird, unconventional investor. We'll catch you next time.